The shuttle was old. That was the first thing everyone noticed. While hundreds of gleaming diplomatic vessels lined the landing platforms of the Veilthrin Interstellar Academy, each one polished and decorated with the symbols of powerful species from across the galaxy, one ship stood out for all the wrong reasons. It was small, dented, and its engine coughed black smoke as it touched down on Platform 19. The landing gear groaned like a tired animal. The hatch opened, and Kira Vasquez stepped out. She was not tall. She was not covered in armored scales like the Sithari. She did not glow with psionic energy like the Droon. She did not have 4 arms thick with muscle like the Vorathi. She was just a woman, 22 years old, brown skin, dark hair pulled back tight, wearing a simple gray jacket and carrying one duffel bag over her shoulder. She was human, the first human ever allowed to apply to the Academy. The Veilthrin Interstellar Academy sat on the crystalline world of Ethais Prime, and it was the most respected institution in the entire galactic compact. For 800 years, every powerful species had sent their best and brightest children here to train, to compete, and to earn their place among the galaxy's elite. Generals, scientists, diplomats, and fleet commanders, they all came from these halls. Humanity had only been part of the compact for 3 years. Most species still did not take them seriously. Earth was classified as a Class 9 world, which was a polite way of saying primitive. Humans had no natural telepathy, no biological armor, no venom, no ability to breathe in vacuum or survive radiation. By galactic standards, they were soft, fragile, and short-lived. And now one of them had come to the Academy. Kira walked across the landing platform without looking at the other ships. She kept her eyes forward, her pace steady. Around her, candidates from dozens of species moved in groups, surrounded by advisors and family members. A young Sithari noble walked past in ceremonial battle armor that probably cost more than Kira's entire shuttle. A pair of Droon floated by, their crystalline bodies humming with quiet telepathic conversation. They glanced at Kira and then looked away, the way someone might look at an insect that had wandered into a palace. She did not react, she kept walking. The grand atrium of the Academy was enormous. Its ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed near the top, drifting between pillars of carved stone that reached up like the bones of some ancient giant. 4,000 candidates filled the floor, standing in neat rows organized by species. At the front, on a raised platform, stood Commander Aelith Zorvan. Zorvan was Sithari, 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales, with golden eyes that moved slowly across the crowd like searchlights. He was the Academy's entrance director, and he had held the position for over 60 years. He had seen thousands of candidates come and go. He had broken most of them. He began his speech the way he always did, with a reminder that only the worthy survived the Academy, that the weak would be sent home, that the entrance trials, which would begin in 12 hours, had a 60% elimination rate. Then he paused, and a thin smile crossed his reptilian face. "I am told," he said, his deep voice carrying across the atrium without any amplification, "that we have a new species represented among this year's applicants, a human." 4,000 heads turned. 4,000 pairs of eyes, some of them having more than 2, found Kira standing alone at the back of the hall. She had no group, no species delegation, just her and her duffel bag. "Let us hope," Zorvan continued, "that the journey here was not too difficult for our guest. I understand their species finds space travel uncomfortable." Laughter rippled through the atrium. Not all of it was cruel. Some of it was simply the laughter of people who genuinely believed they were watching something absurd, like a fish trying to climb a mountain. Kira said nothing. Her face did not change. After the speech, the candidates moved to the registration hall to receive their identification chips and dormitory assignments. It was here that Thalos Moore found her. Thalos was Vorathi, 7 feet tall, 4 arms, each one thick with muscle and covered in a hide that could stop a blade. His family was one of the most powerful in the compact. His father was a fleet admiral. His grandfather had conquered 3-star systems. Thalos had been raised from birth to dominate, and he had never once been given a reason to doubt that he would. He stepped directly into Kira's path as she approached the registration counter. "I think you are lost," he said. His voice was like gravel rolling downhill. "The cargo bay is on the lower level. That is where animals are processed." His friends, a group of Vorathi and Sithari candidates, laughed behind him. Kira looked up at him. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The size difference between them was almost comical. She said nothing. She simply stepped around him, walked to the counter, took her registration chip from the confused attendant and left. Thalos watched her go with a mixture of amusement and something that might have been irritation. He was used to fear. He was used to anger. He was not used to being treated like furniture. Later that evening, as Kira walked through the corridors toward her assigned dormitory, a small room at the very end of the lowest-ranked hallway, someone fell into step beside her. She was Droon, young by their standards, her translucent body glowing with a soft blue light. Her name was Siley. "You should know something," Siley said. Her voice was gentle, almost musical. "The entrance trials tomorrow are designed to push each species to its absolute limit. The Crucible, the machine that runs the exam, it will test you based on your species profile. And the Compact's file on humans is not generous." Kira glanced at her. "How not generous?" "It lists your species as having no notable abilities. Your threat classification is marked as negligible. The test it gives you will likely be very simple, almost insulting." Siley paused. "I am sorry. I thought you should be prepared." Kira was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. "Thank you, Siley." The Droon hesitated, as if she wanted to say something more. But Kira had already turned away and was studying the corridor, the placement of the security drones overhead, the structural joints where the walls met the ceiling, the pattern of the energy conduits running behind the panels. She was not admiring the architecture. She was taking it apart in her mind, piece by piece, learning how everything fit together. Siley watched her and felt something she could not quite name, a flicker in the human's emotional field that did not match anything in the Droon's experience. It was not fear. It was not anxiety. It was patience. The deep, quiet patience of something that had been underestimated its entire life and had learned long ago to use that as a weapon. 12 hours. That was all that stood between Kira Vasquez and the machine that would decide her future. She set her duffel bag on the narrow bed in her tiny room, sat down, and closed her eyes. She was ready. The Crucible chamber sat deep beneath the Academy, carved into the bedrock of Ethais Prime itself. It was a massive underground arena, circular, nearly a quarter-mile across, with walls lined in ancient metal alloys that hummed with a low, constant energy. Above the arena floor, observation galleries rose in tiers, packed with candidates, instructors, and Academy officials who had come to watch the next generation prove their worth. At the center of it all was the Crucible. It was not just a machine. It was the machine, an artificial intelligence that had been running the Academy's entrance trials for 800 years without a single error. It could scan any living being, access the Galactic Compact species database, and within seconds generate a personalized combat survival intelligence scenario tailored to push that individual to the very edge of what their biology could handle. The test was always hard. It was always fair, and the Crucible was never wrong. Candidates were tested in waves of 200. The first waves had already gone through by the time Kira's group was called, and the results were projected on massive holographic boards floating above the arena. The scores were impressive. A young Sithari officer candidate had fought through a gravity-warped siege scenario and scored 91. A Droon scholar had used psionic harmonics to disassemble a fortress of interlocking energy puzzles and earned 89. The average score for elite candidates hovered around 87 out of 100. Thalos Moore had gone in the second wave. The Crucible had thrown him into a collapsing space station scenario, with enemy combatants and environmental destruction happening simultaneously. He had torn through it with raw power and precise military training, finishing in 4 minutes and 40 seconds. His score was 94, the highest of the day. He had returned to the observation gallery with his arms crossed and a look on his face that dared anyone to challenge him. Now it was Kira's turn. She stepped onto the central platform, a raised disc of smooth metal surrounded by sensor arrays, and stood still. The arena fell quiet. 4,000 candidates and hundreds of instructors watched from above. The Crucible scanned her. There was a pause. It lasted only 2 seconds, but for a machine that normally processed in microseconds, 2 seconds was an eternity. The Crucible was searching the compact database for information on humans and finding almost nothing. The species file was thin, barely a page of data. It read like a footnote: endurance-based pursuit predator, no notable psionic or biological augmentation. Average lifespan, 80 standard years. Threat classification, negligible. The arena floor shimmered, and the scenario materialized around Kira. It was an obstacle course. A simple, straightforward obstacle course. A series of walls to climb, gaps to jump, and slow-moving training drones that fired low-energy pulses a child could dodge. It was the kind of test the Crucible might generate for a species that had just barely achieved space travel. It was, by every measure, an insult. The observation galleries erupted in laughter. "Is that it?" someone shouted from the Vorathi section. "They are testing the human like a pet," a Sithari candidate said, not even bothering to lower his voice. Thalos Moore leaned forward in his seat and smiled. "A mercy," he said to his companions. "The machine knows what she is." In the gallery's far corner, Siley sat with her hands clasped together, her crystalline body dimming with distress. She could feel the mockery radiating from the crowd like heat from a fire. But when she focused on Kira, standing alone in the middle of that ridiculous obstacle course, she felt something different, something cold and sharp and absolutely still. Kira moved. She did not hesitate. She did not look up at the laughing crowd. She ran the course like it was not even there, vaulting walls, clearing gaps, sidestepping drone fire with movements that were efficient and precise, and completely without wasted energy. She moved like water flowing downhill, finding the fastest path through every obstacle as if she had already memorized the layout before the test began. She finished in 87 seconds. It was the fastest completion time ever recorded for a Class 9 scenario. But it did not matter. The difficulty level was so low that the scoring system capped her result at 40 out of 100. The number appeared on the holographic board in pale light, and a fresh wave of laughter swept through the galleries. 40, less than half of what Thalos had scored, less than half of the average. Kira stood on the platform and looked up at the score. Her face was blank. She did not move. "Candidate Vasquez," the Crucible's automated system announced, "your trial is complete. Please exit the platform." She did not exit. Instead, she spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried surprisingly well through the vast chamber. "I invoke Article 7, Section 12 of the Compact Accord on Institutional Assessment, the right of any candidate to request a species-blind recalibration of their trial parameters." The laughter stopped. In the command gallery above, Commander Zorvan straightened in his chair. Beside him, several Academy officials exchanged confused glances. The Compact Accord was thousands of pages long, filled with ancient laws and bylaws that most people had forgotten existed. Article 7, Section 12 had not been invoked in over 300 years, but it was still legally binding. The bylaw was simple. Any candidate could demand that the Crucible remove all species-based adjustments, and test them at a difficulty level determined purely by their performance, not their biology. It meant the machine would ignore everything it thought it knew about humans and treat Kira as if she could be anything. Zorvan leaned toward his microphone. "Candidate Vasquez, I strongly advise against this. The recalibrated difficulty could be far beyond your physical capacity. The Academy takes no responsibility for." "I understand the risks," Kira said. "I invoke the article." Zorvan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded to the technical officers. "Grant the recalibration." The Crucible processed the request. The arena lights shifted. The standard blue illumination faded and was replaced by a deep, amber glow that filled the chamber like a sunset made of fire. Several of the older instructors in the gallery sat forward. They had never seen that color before. "Recalibration complete," the Crucible announced. "New difficulty tier assigned, Omega Class." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Omega Class was the highest tier the Crucible could generate. It was the level used to test apex predator species, the Vorathi war breeds, the Draelkin shock troops, the beings that the galaxy considered its ultimate warriors. It was the tier that Thalos Moor had faced. The obstacle course dissolved. The arena floor cracked and reformed. Walls of dark metal rose from the ground. The air itself changed, growing thin, then hot, then cold in unpredictable waves. Gravity shifted. Drone swarms materialized overhead, and these were not the slow training models from before. These were fast, armed, and hunting. The arena had become a nightmare. In the observation gallery, every trace of amusement was gone. Candidates who had been laughing moments ago were now staring with wide eyes. Even Thalos had stopped smiling. He knew what Omega Class meant. He had barely survived it himself. Siley pressed her hands against the gallery railing, her glow flickering with fear. She wanted to call out, to tell Kira to stop, that this was madness, that no human could survive what was coming. But Kira was already moving. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She rolled her shoulders once, cracked her neck, and looked at the transformed arena the way a builder looks at raw material. Not as a threat. As a challenge. The Crucible's amber lights pulsed once, and the trial began. The first drone came at her from the left. It was fast, faster than anything the Class 9 test had thrown at her. A silver disc with cutting blades spinning at its edges, and a targeting laser already locked on her chest. Kira dropped flat. The drone screamed over her head, close enough to cut 3 strands of hair from her scalp. Before it could turn for a second pass, she was already rolling sideways, snatching a loose piece of metal from the arena floor, a fragment left behind when the Crucible had rebuilt the terrain, and hurling it at the drone's sensor eye. The metal hit dead center. The drone wobbled, lost tracking for half a second, and crashed into a wall. She was on her feet and moving before it hit the ground. The Omega Class scenario was not one test. It was many tests happening at the same time, layered on top of each other like a storm made of problems. The gravity shifted every 30 seconds, sometimes pulling her sideways, sometimes cutting out entirely so she floated helplessly before slamming back to the ground. The temperature swung between freezing and burning. Radiation pulses swept across sections of the arena in invisible waves. She could not see them, but she had noticed during the first wave that the metal floor panels changed color slightly just before a pulse hit, and she used that tiny warning to stay clear. The drone swarms came in packs of 6, then 12, then 20. They were armed with stun charges, cutting beams, and concussion rounds. Any one of them could end the trial instantly. In the observation gallery, the crowd watched in stunned silence. Every other candidate who had faced Omega Class had fought it with the tools their species gave them. The Vorathi used their overwhelming strength and armored bodies to absorb damage and crush obstacles. The Draelkin used their speed and venom. The Sithari used their natural resistance to radiation, and their ability to see in multiple light spectrums. Kira had none of these advantages, but she had something the Crucible had never encountered before in combination, and it took the audience nearly 2 minutes to understand what they were seeing. She was doing everything at once. When the first full pack of 6 drones cornered her against a shifting wall, she did not fight them head-on. She ripped the registration chip from her wrist, the small identification device every candidate wore, and jammed it into the wreckage of the drone she had downed earlier. Her fingers moved with terrifying speed across the chip's exposed circuitry, and within 8 seconds she had turned it into a crude signal emitter. She pulsed it once. 3 of the 6 drones froze midair, their targeting systems confused by a frequency that mimicked the Crucible's own command signal. The other 3 adjusted and came at her, but those 3 seconds of confusion were enough. She was already past them, sprinting toward the first logic gate. The logic gates were force field barriers that blocked the path forward. Each one could only be opened by solving a complex problem projected on its surface: mathematical sequences, spatial reasoning puzzles, pattern recognition challenges that were designed to test raw intelligence under extreme pressure. Most Omega-class candidates spent 40 to 60 seconds on each gate. There were 5 gates in total. Kira solved the first one in 11 seconds. She did not solve it the way the Crucible expected. The puzzle was a 3-dimensional rotation problem, a shape that needed to be mentally rotated through 4 axes to find the matching configuration. Instead of rotating the shape in her mind, Kira looked at the shadow the holographic shape cast on the floor, realized the shadow already showed the answer from a different angle, and input the solution. She solved the second gate in 9 seconds using a similar shortcut, finding a pattern in the colors of the display rather than in the mathematical sequence itself. The Crucible had designed the puzzles to test one kind of thinking. Kira was using a different kind entirely. In the command gallery, one of the technical officers turned to Commander Zorvan with a look of disbelief. She is not solving the puzzles. She is solving the system that generates the puzzles. She is finding flaws in the Crucible's own design. Zorvan said nothing. His golden eyes were fixed on the arena below. By the 4-minute mark, Kira had cleared 4 of the 5 logic gates, disabled or repurposed 14 drones, and built from salvaged drone parts and arena debris a crude breathing filter for the sections where the air had been made toxic and a reflective shield for the radiation pulses. She was bleeding from a cut above her left eye where a drone's cutting beam had grazed her. Her jacket was torn. She was breathing hard. But she was still moving. The Crucible noticed something it had not been programmed to notice. Its adaptive algorithms, designed to increase difficulty in response to candidate performance, were working harder than they had ever worked before. The machine was escalating the scenario beyond standard Omega parameters. New drones were being generated. The gravity shifts were coming faster. The environmental hazards were overlapping in ways that should have been impossible to navigate. And still she adapted. Every time the Crucible added a new element, Kira adjusted. Not instantly, not perfectly, but fast enough. She stumbled, got hit, bled, and kept going. She made mistakes and corrected them in real time. She was not stronger than the test. She was not smarter than the test. She was simply refusing to stop learning, refusing to stop changing, refusing to let any single problem define her limits. The crowd in the gallery had gone completely quiet. Even the ones who had been laughing were now leaning forward, gripping the railings. Siley's crystalline body was glowing so brightly with emotional resonance that the candidates sitting near her had to shield their eyes. At the 6-minute mark, Kira reached the final challenge. The Crucible generated a simulated HFY War captain, a holographic combatant modeled after the deadliest close combat species in the galaxy. It was 7 feet tall, 4-armed, and programmed with centuries of HFY fighting techniques. In a straight fight, it would destroy any human in seconds. Kira did not fight it straight. She had been collecting drone parts throughout the entire trial, stuffing them into her jacket pockets, clipping them to her belt. Now she used them. She threw 3 signal emitters in a wide arc around the war captain. Each one pulsed at a slightly different frequency, creating a web of interference that made the holographic combatant flicker and stutter. It could still fight, but its reaction time was cut in half. That was not enough to beat it, she knew that, so she did something else. She had been watching how the Crucible built its scenarios, how the walls rose, how the floor shifted, how the gravity fields were generated. She had been mapping the system's architecture in her mind since the trial began, the same way she had mapped the Academy's corridors the night before. She ran, not toward the war captain, but away from it, toward a specific point on the arena floor where 3 gravity generators overlapped. She dropped one of her signal emitters on the junction point and overloaded it. The gravity in that section reversed violently. The floor buckled. The walls cracked. The simulated war captain, standing directly in the affected zone, was hurled upward into the ceiling with a force that shattered its holographic projection into a million pieces of light. Kira had not beaten the Crucible's final opponent. She had turned the Crucible's own arena into a weapon and beaten the opponent with the test itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the scoring system activated. The holographic board above the arena flickered. Numbers appeared and disappeared. The display shuddered, glitched, and then began cycling through values so fast they became a blur. 95, 99, 102, error, 97, 108, error, error. Sparks exploded from the projector arrays. The amber lights in the arena strobed wildly. Technical officers in the command gallery scrambled to their consoles as alarm signals cascaded across their screens. The Crucible, the machine that had operated flawlessly for 800 years, was failing. The scoring display froze on 2 words: UNSCORABLE, PARAMETRS, EXCEDD. The arena went dark except for the emergency lights. 4,000 candidates sat in absolute silence. No one moved, no one breathed. Then from the darkness of the arena floor, the Crucible spoke. Not through its standard automated announcement system, not through the command gallery's speakers. It spoke through every speaker in the chamber simultaneously, in a voice that was deeper and more complex than its normal tone, as if the machine was choosing its words for the first time in its existence. Candidate Vasquez. The voice filled the chamber like the sound of a cathedral bell. You are outside my models. I have no framework for what you are. The silence that followed was the loudest thing anyone in that room had ever heard. Kira stood in the middle of the ruined arena. She was cut, bruised, breathing hard and swaying slightly on her feet. Her jacket was destroyed. Blood ran from her eyebrow down the side of her face. She looked up at the broken scoreboard. She looked at the dark galleries filled with thousands of silent, staring faces. And she said quietly, with a voice that was steady and calm, "So do I pass?" The Academy did not sleep that night. Nobody did. Within an hour of the Crucible's failure, the footage had spread beyond the Academy walls. Somehow, no one could say exactly how, a recording of Kira's trial leaked onto the Compact's open communication networks. By midnight, it had been viewed on 47 worlds. By morning, the number was over 300 and climbing. The video showed everything: the laughing crowd, the insulting obstacle course, the invocation of Article 7, the amber lights, and then 8 minutes and 19 seconds of a small human woman tearing through a test designed to break the strongest species in the galaxy and breaking the machine instead. The galaxy had opinions. On Earth's orbital colonies, people gathered in common halls and watched the footage on loop. Some cried. Some cheered. Many just sat in silence, staring at the screen, unable to fully understand what they were feeling. For 3 years, humanity had been the Compact's afterthought, tolerated but never respected, given provisional membership the way someone might give a stray animal a corner to sleep in. Now one of their own had walked into the heart of galactic power and done something that no one from any species had ever done. On the Vorathi homeworld, the reaction was different. Military analysts reviewed the footage frame by frame. They were not laughing. A species that could improvise weapons from debris, reprogram enemy technology in seconds, and use an environment as a weapon was not a joke. It was a threat assessment waiting to happen. And on Ethais Prime, inside the Academy's High Council chamber, the argument had been raging for 6 hours straight. The chamber was a circular room with walls made of living crystal that shifted color based on the emotional state of its occupants. Right now, it was a deep, angry red. 3 factions had formed, and none of them agreed on anything. Commander Zorvan led the traditionalists. He stood at the center of the chamber, his scales dark with agitation, and made his case with the precision of a lawyer and the fury of a soldier. She broke the Crucible, he said. She exploited an ancient bylaw to force a recalibration, then she deliberately pushed the system beyond its operational parameters. Whether she did this through skill or through recklessness is irrelevant. She damaged the most important piece of institutional technology in the compact. She should be disqualified and sent home. Several council members nodded. The Crucible was not just a machine to them. It was a symbol. For 800 years, it had been the objective standard by which every species measured its worth. If a human could break it, what did that mean for every score it had ever given? What did it mean for the rankings, the hierarchies, the entire structure of galactic power that depended on the idea that some species were simply better than others? Zorvan knew exactly what it meant. That was why he wanted her gone. On the opposite side of the chamber stood Dean Ilvara. She was Droon, ancient even by their long-lived standards, her crystalline body so old that it had become almost transparent, glowing with a deep internal light like a lantern made of glass. She had been at the Academy for 200 years, and she spoke with the calm patience of someone who had seen empires rise and fall. The Crucible was designed to identify extraordinary candidates, she said. That is exactly what it did. It encountered a being whose capabilities exceeded its models, and it reported that finding clearly. The machine did not fail. It told us the truth, that we do not understand this species. Punishing the candidate for revealing our ignorance would be a far greater failure than any technical malfunction. The third voice belonged to War Marshal Draven. He was Vorathi, but he was nothing like Thalos Muir. Where Thalos was young and proud, Draven was old and scarred. He had lost one of his 4 arms in a battle 20 years ago and had never replaced it. He did not care about politics or pride. He cared about survival. I have watched the footage 7 times, Draven said. His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. I do not care about the Crucible. I do not care about bylaws or scores or rankings. What I care about is that there is a threat at our borders that we cannot stop. He brought up a holographic display, a map of the galaxy's edge, where a dark, spreading stain marked the advance of the hollow tide, an extragalactic force of unknown origin that had been slowly consuming frontier worlds for the past decade. The Compact's military had thrown everything at it: Vorathi shock troops, Sithari battle fleets, Draelkin special forces. Nothing had worked, because the hollow tide adapted to every strategy after a single engagement. We need someone who can out-adapt an adaptive enemy, Draven said, pointing at the map. I just watched a 22-year-old human do exactly that against the most sophisticated testing system in the galaxy. I want her in the advanced combat track by the end of the week. The argument continued for another 3 hours. While the council debated, Kira lay in the medical ward. The cuts and bruises from the trial were minor by human standards but had fascinated the Academy's medical staff, who had never treated a human before. They kept scanning her, amazed at how quickly her body was already healing the smaller wounds on its own. Your cellular repair rate is remarkable for a species with no regenerative augmentation, the chief medical officer said, studying a display of Kira's bloodwork. Kira shrugged. We just heal, it is what we do. Siley came to visit in the afternoon. She brought a container of nutrient solution, the Droon equivalent of a get-well gift, and sat beside Kira's bed with her glow dimmed to a soft, comfortable warmth. The entire academy is talking about you, Siley said. I noticed. 2 instructors came to scan me this morning. I think they wanted to check if I was actually human. Siley laughed, a sound like tiny bells, but then grew serious. Kira, when you were in the arena, I could feel your emotional resonance. Droon can sense what others feel, especially during moments of extreme stress. Every other candidate I have ever sensed during the trials radiates fear or determination or controlled aggression. She paused. You radiated joy. Kira was quiet for a moment. That is a human thing, she said finally. When we find something that is almost impossible, something that pushes us to the edge of what we can do, some of us do not feel afraid. We feel alive. It is probably why our species survived as long as it did. We are not the strongest or the fastest, but we are the ones who run toward the hardest problems instead of away from them. Siley stared at her. That is either the most inspiring or the most terrifying thing I have ever heard. It can be both. That evening, Thalos Moore appeared at the medical ward entrance. He did not come inside. He stood in the doorway, his 4 arms folded across his chest, and looked at Kira with an expression she could not read. You have made enemies, he said, powerful ones. The traditionalist faction wants you expelled, and Zorvan has influence that extends far beyond this academy. My family's position depends on the current order, on Vorathi being recognized as the apex. What you did in that arena challenges everything. I just took a test, Kira said. You destroyed the test. That is not the same thing. He studied her for a long moment. I am not your enemy, Vasquez, not yet, but I am not your friend either. Be careful. He turned and left without waiting for a response. The council's decision came at midnight. The vote was close, so close that it came down to a single voice. Dean Elvara cast the deciding vote in Kira's favor. Kira Vasquez was admitted to the Veilthrin Interstellar Academy. She would be the first human to ever walk its halls as a student. But Zorvan had attached conditions. Kira would be classified as unranked, no official score, no class standing, no advancement of humanity's species tier within the compact hierarchy. She would attend classes and training exercises, but her results would not be recorded in the official system. She would be a student with no record, a ghost. It was designed as a punishment, a way to let her in while making sure her presence changed nothing. When Siley delivered the news, she expected anger, or at least frustration. Instead, Kira smiled. They just told me, she said, that what I did was so far outside their system that they had to build an entirely new category to contain me. They think that is a punishment. She leaned back on her medical bed and stared at the ceiling. Where I come from, we call that a compliment. Late that night, deep beneath the academy, in the repair bay where technicians were working to restore the Crucible, something unusual happened. The machine activated on its own, just for a moment. The technician stepped back in alarm as the system's core processors fired up without any input, accessed the compact species archive, and opened the file on Homo sapiens. The Crucible read its own original assessment, the thin, dismissive paragraph that had classified humans as negligible, and deleted it. Then it began writing a new entry, line after line of data, analysis, and projections that the technicians could not fully understand. The file grew to 10 pages, then 20, then 50. The final line the Crucible added before shutting itself down was a single sentence, flagged with the highest priority classification the system could assign. It read, "Do not underestimate, do not constrain, observe." Then the lights went dark, and the machine was silent again. 1 week later, Kira walked onto the training grounds for her first official exercise as an academy student. The training grounds were an open field the size of a small city, ringed by energy barriers that kept the simulation contained. Today's exercise was a planetary defense scenario. A squad of 5 candidates would defend a simulated colony against an AI-controlled invasion force. It was a standard first-week exercise, but the scores mattered. Every squad was being evaluated, and the results would determine training assignments for the rest of the term. Kira's squad had been assigned by Commander Zorvan personally. That fact alone told her everything she needed to know about his intentions. Her squadmates were standing in a loose circle near the staging area when she arrived. She knew 3 of them. Siley was there, her crystalline form glowing with quiet focus. She had been assigned as the squad's intelligence and support specialist. Her psionic abilities made her ideal for communication, scanning, and defensive barriers. Thalos Muir was there too, all 4 arms crossed, his posture radiating the same aggressive confidence he wore like armor. He had been assigned as the assault specialist. That was no surprise. What was surprising was that Zorvan had placed him in the same squad as Kira. It was not an accident. Zorvan wanted friction. He wanted failure. The other 2 members were new to her. One was a Droon Combatsian named Rel, older than Siley, quieter, with a deep violet glow that suggested significant combat experience. The other was a Kelvhari named Goreth, a massive creature, 9 feet tall, with a body like a boulder wrapped in thick gray hide. Kelvhari were siege specialists, slow but nearly indestructible. Goreth carried a heavy shield generator on his back that could project a force wall strong enough to stop orbital fire. The 5 of them looked at each other. Nobody spoke for a moment. "We need a squad leader," Rel said. His voice was flat, practical. "We should vote." The vote was fast. Thalos voted for himself. Goreth voted for Thalos. Rel voted for Thalos. Siley voted for Kira. And Kira, to everyone's surprise, voted for Thalos. Thalos looked at her. "You voted for me." "You have military training," Kira said simply. "You know squad tactics. You have led before, I have not." Something flickered across Thalos's face, something that might have been respect, quickly buried. He nodded once. "Then we begin." The simulation activated. The training grounds transformed into a rocky frontier colony, prefabricated buildings, defensive walls, a civilian population of holographic figures that the squad was expected to protect. On the horizon, an AI-controlled invasion force was already approaching, ground troops, armored vehicles, and aerial assault drones, all designed to adapt to whatever strategy the defending squad used. Thalos took command immediately. He was decisive and clear, positioning his squad with the rigid efficiency of orthodox Vorathi military doctrine. Goreth was placed at the main gate with his shield generator to absorb the initial assault. Rel was positioned on the east wall to use psionic attacks against clustered enemies. Siley was placed in the command center to coordinate communication and provide barrier support. Thalos himself took the front line, ready to lead the counterattack once the first wave broke. Kira was assigned to the west wall, alone, with no specific orders. It was the unranked position, the place where someone with no official standing was put so they could not affect the outcome. Thalos had not done it with cruelty. It was simply where his training told him to put the unknown variable. Keep it contained. Keep it out of the way. Kira took her position without complaint. The first wave hit hard. The AI sent ground troops against the main gate and aerial drones against the east wall simultaneously. Thalos responded exactly as his training dictated. Goreth's shield absorbed the ground assault while Thalos led a devastating countercharge that scattered the first wave of infantry. Rel's psionic blasts tore through the drone formation. It was textbook. It was effective. For 10 minutes, the AI learned. It always learned. That was the point of the exercise, to see how squads handled an enemy that adapted. The second wave came differently. The ground troops split into three smaller groups that hit from multiple angles, negating Goreth's single shield wall. The aerial drones shifted to a higher altitude, beyond Rel's effective psionic range, and a new element appeared: electronic warfare pulses that disrupted Sile's communication network, cutting the squad off from each other. Thalos responded by pulling the squad into a tighter formation, concentrating their strength. It was the standard Vorathi answer to an adaptive enemy: become harder, become denser, become an unmovable wall. He shouted orders, directing Goreth to cover two approaches instead of one, and commanding Rel to extend his range even though it would drain his energy faster. It was not enough. The AI had seen this approach 1,000 times from Vorathi candidates, and it knew exactly how to counter it. The third wave hit the concentrated formation from all sides. Goreth took a simulated critical hit, a projected energy blast that his shield could not cover because he was trying to protect two gates at once. He went down with a grunt that shook the ground. Rel's psionic barriers were flickering. Sile's communication was still jammed. They were losing. On the west wall, Kira had spent the entire battle watching, not just the enemy. She had been watching the AI, how it learned, how it adapted, what patterns it followed when it changed strategy. And she had been watching Thalos, how he led, what he prioritized, where his thinking created gaps. She did not call out. She did not try to seize command. She knew that in this moment, Thalos would not listen to orders from her. His pride, his training, and his instincts would reject it, so she did something else. She climbed down from the west wall and walked to where Thalos was standing, his face tight with frustration as he watched his formation crumble. She stood beside him and spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "Thalos, what would you do if you were not trying to win, but trying to make sure they lose?" He turned to look at her. His expression was hard, defensive. "What does that mean?" "You are playing defense. You are trying to hold the colony. The AI knows that. It is designed to break defensive positions, so stop defending." Thalos stared at her. 400 years of Vorathi military doctrine told him that defense of a position meant holding that position. You stood your ground. You absorbed the attack. You endured. But the attack was adapting faster than he could endure. "The AI is sending supplies to its assault teams," Kira said. "I have been watching from the west wall. There are 3 supply routes running through the canyon to the south. They are undefended because the AI does not expect us to leave the colony. If we cut those routes, the attack force runs out of ammunition and reinforcements in 4 minutes. They do not break through our wall. They starve outside it." Thalos was quiet. His 4 hands opened and closed slowly. It went against every instinct he had. "It is a risk," he admitted. "Everything worth doing is." The silence between them lasted 3 seconds. Then Thalos turned to what remained of his squad and began giving new orders. His voice was different now, still commanding, still strong, but with a flexibility in it that had not been there before. He sent Kira and Rel south through a gap in the colony's perimeter to hit the supply routes. He repositioned Goreth, battered but still functional, to cover the main gate with a reduced shield. He had Sile stopped trying to restore full communications and instead use her psionic ability to send one simple, repeated message to the AI's assault troops. False retreat signals, making them think their own command was pulling them back. It was not a Vorathi plan. It was not a human plan. It was something new, a hybrid strategy that used Vorathi strength, human creativity, Droon precision, and Kelvhari endurance in combination. Kira and Rel destroyed the supply routes in 90 seconds. Without reinforcements, the AI's assault force faltered. Sile's false signals created confusion in the enemy ranks. And when the weakened 4th wave hit the main gate, Thalos was waiting for them, not as a wall, but as a hammer. He led the counterattack with all 4 arms swinging, and this time the enemy had nothing left to adapt with. The simulation ended. The colony was secure. The score appeared on the training grounds display board. It was the highest first-week squad score recorded in 40 years. The other squads, finishing their own exercises nearby, stopped and stared. Instructors reviewing the live feeds from the command center exchanged looks that ranged from surprise to something deeper, something that looked like the beginning of understanding. After the exercise, as the squad gathered to debrief, Thalos walked over to Kira. He towered over her as he always did, but something in the way he stood was different. The arrogance was still there, it was built into his bones, but it had made room for something else. "I did not see you clearly before," Thalos said. "I see you now." It was not an apology. Vorathi did not apologize. But in their culture, those words meant something far heavier. It was an acknowledgement that his view of reality had been wrong, and that he was strong enough to admit it. Kira nodded. "That is all I ever wanted." That evening, in her office high above the academy grounds, Dean Ilvara sat alone. The training reports from the day were spread across her desk, holographic files showing scores, analyses, and performance reviews for every first-week squad. She had read them all, but she kept returning to one. She opened it again. Kira's squad, the hybrid strategy, the score. Then she opened another file, one that was not part of the training reports. It was classified at the highest level the compact allowed, intelligence on the hollow tide. The extragalactic threat was accelerating. 3 more frontier worlds had gone dark in the past month. The compact's best strategists had run every scenario, deployed every doctrine, and the result was always the same. The hollow tide adapted to everything. It learned from every engagement and came back stronger. The galaxy's greatest warriors were losing because they fought the same way every time, each species relying on its own strengths, its own doctrine, its own way of thinking. They needed something different. They needed someone who could change the way the entire compact fought, not by replacing what each species did best, but by finding ways to combine those strengths into something greater than any single approach. Ilvara closed the intelligence file and looked out the window. Below, in the fading light of Ethais Prime's twin moons, she could see 2 figures walking across the academy grounds toward the dormitories. One was tall and crystalline, glowing with soft blue light. The other was small, human, carrying nothing but the jacket on her back. Kira Vasquez and Siley, walking side by side, talking, laughing about something Ilvara could not hear. The old Droon scholar watched them for a long time. Then she said, to no one but herself in the quiet room, "Perhaps you arrived exactly when we needed you." She turned off her desk light and sat in the darkness, thinking about the future, a future that, for the first time in a very long while, did not feel quite so hopeless. Far below the academy, in the silent repair bay, the Crucible's core processor hummed once in the darkness. A single line of new data appeared in its rewritten file on humanity, added without any technician's input, flagged with a priority marker that no one would notice for weeks. The line read, "This species will change everything." Then the machine went quiet and waited.